It's been 1 year since Donald Trump was elected, and voters in swing states have thoughts on how the president is handling the U.S. economy.
When Trump came to office, I think it's fair to say that all hell broke loose.
Bloomberg News found the results to be a mixed bag. Some are concerned about rising prices. Some wish the president had focused more on domestic issues rather than foreign affairs. And the future of the job market and AI cropped up as well.
He got elected primarily because of the promise where voters were feeling it in the grocery stores and where voters were feeling it in interest rates. I think that's what propelled him forward, and he has not delivered on that at all.
The overall economy is very stable. I think it's steady, and I think if Trump can regulate AI, can make it so the younger people can see how AI cannot eliminate their jobs but help them in their jobs, I think it'd be a lot better.
As a small business owner coming into this year, I was feeling like
the 2026 midterms and Trump's political future. We just had a special election in Tennessee that has Democrats literally dancing in the streets and Republicans quietly freaking out behind closed doors. And here's the kicker. The Republican actually won the race. Yeah, you heard that right. The GOP won. And they're still terrified about what this means for their political survival. This is one of those stories where the real news isn't what happened on election night. It's what the results tell us about the massive political earthquake that's building underneath Trump's feet right now. The implications of this Tennessee race are so massive that political insiders on both sides are completely rethinking their strategies for 2026. And what they're discovering should absolutely terrify every Republican who thought Trump's re-election meant they were safe for the next 4 years. So, here's what went down in Tennessee, and trust me, this is way more important than anyone in the mainstream media is telling you. Matt Van Epps, the Trump-endorsed Republican candidate, won a special House election in Tennessee's 5th District against Democrat Afton Benn. On paper, that sounds like good news for Republicans, right? Trump's guy won in a deep red state that Trump himself carried by 22 points just over a year ago. The GOP should be celebrating. The media should be talking about Trump's continued dominance, and Democrats should be crying into their organic fair trade coffee cups. But that's not what's happening at all. Instead, Democrats are acting like they just discovered political gold, and Republicans are running around like their hair is on fire trying to figure out how they almost lost a seat they should have won by 30 points. The disconnect between what should have happened and what actually happened is so dramatic that it's forcing everyone to completely recalculate their assumptions about where American politics is heading, and those new calculations are painting a picture that should make Republicans absolutely panic about their future prospects. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
We were poised for real growth. It felt like had dodged a bullet with a recession. It felt like the Fed was being responsible with rates. And overall, we were really poised for a really big year. In fact, our biggest year yet. And more than anything else, I think as a small business owner, the thing that we've come to expect is that we can't expect anything.
I do volunteer work at a food pantry here in the heart of Madison, just off the Capitol Square. And, a lot of our clients are really hurting at this point. So we're doing our best to stock up on supplies and be able to distribute food to those who really need it. And some of them are families. I mean, they're not just single individuals, they're families. And, there's a real need there. So I think this is a very difficult time. Nobody should be without food. Nobody should be without good health care. Nobody should be having to struggle to make ends meet despite being working people.
But here's where this gets absolutely wild, and this is the part that should make every Trump supporter nervous as hell. Even though Van Epps won, Democrats massively outperformed expectations in what should have been a total blowout for Republicans. We're talking about a district that Trump dominated, in a state where Republicans control everything, during a special election when Democratic turnout is usually terrible. And yet Afton Benn came way closer than anyone thought possible. The margin wasn't the 20 or 30-point Republican victory that everyone expected. It was a much tighter race that has political insiders on both sides completely reevaluating their assumptions about 2026. Come on, when you're supposed to win by a landslide and you barely squeak by, that's not a victory. That's a warning sign that your political coalition is falling apart. What we're seeing here is the political equivalent of a canary dying in a coal mine, except the coal mine is the entire Republican Party, and the canary is Trump's ability to deliver easy victories for GOP candidates who should be winning by massive margins in deep red districts. DNC Chair Ken Martin didn't waste any time jumping all over this result, saying that Tennessee sends clear signals of voter dissatisfaction with Trump's agenda. Now, normally, I'd roll my eyes at Democratic spin after they lose an election. But here's the thing. Martin isn't spinning a loss. He's spinning a near miss that nobody saw coming. When Democrats are this excited about losing an election, you know something fundamental has shifted in American politics. And Republicans know it too because they're not celebrating their victory. They're quietly panicking about what this means for races in competitive districts where they actually need to worry about losing. If Trump's hand-picked candidate can barely win in deep red Tennessee, what's going to happen in purple districts where Republicans are already vulnerable? The fact that Republicans are treating a victory like a defeat tells you everything you need to know about how dramatic this shift really is, and it suggests that the political landscape has changed in ways that could completely destroy Republican hopes for maintaining power beyond Trump's second term. USA Today called this race a major statement and warning signs for the GOP, and honestly, that might be the understatement of the year. Think about what this result really means. Trump is less than a year into his second term. He should still be in his honeymoon period. The economy is doing reasonably well, and he just won a convincing victory in 2024. By all rights, this should be the peak of Republican power and Trump's political influence. But instead, we're seeing early signs that voters are already getting tired of the Trump show and ready for something different. And if that's happening now, imagine what's going to happen by 2026, when Trump's second term is starting to wind down and voters are looking ahead to life after Trump. The timing of this voter fatigue is absolutely devastating for Republicans because it suggests that Trump's political capital is evaporating much faster than anyone expected. And without that capital, the entire Republican political operation could collapse like a house of cards in the next midterm election. The timing of this election is also crucial because it's the first real test of Trump's political strength since he won re-election. Special elections are often treated as referendums on the sitting president, and this result suggests that Trump's political magic might already be wearing off. Republicans who were counting on riding Trump's coattails to easy victories in 2026 are now realizing they might actually have to work for their wins. And for a party that's become completely dependent on Trump's personal popularity, that's a terrifying prospect. What happens to the Republican Party when Trump isn't on the ballot and they have to win elections based on their own ideas and qualifications instead of just riding his popularity? The Tennessee result suggests that Republicans are about to find out the hard way that they've become so dependent on Trump that they can't function as a normal political party anymore. And that realization is sending shockwaves through GOP leadership, who are starting to understand that their entire political strategy might be built on quicksand. But the most interesting part of this whole story is how it connects to other warning signs that Republicans are trying to ignore. Remember that North Carolina Supreme Court disaster we talked about recently? That was another race where Trump's endorsement wasn't enough to save a terrible candidate. We're starting to see a pattern where Trump's political influence isn't as powerful as it used to be, especially when he's backing candidates who can't win on their own merits. And if that trend continues, it's going to be a bloodbath for Republicans in 2026. The Tennessee result might be the canary in the coal mine that tells us the Trump era is finally starting to come to an end. Republicans are already expressing rare midterm concerns, according to Politico, and that tells you everything you need to know about how seriously they're taking this result. These are people who spent the last year talking about how Trump's re-election would give them unstoppable momentum heading into 2026. But now they're looking at the Tennessee numbers and realizing that maybe they're not as invincible as they thought. When Republicans start worrying about midterm elections before Trump has even finished his first year in office, you know they're seeing something in the data that scares the hell out of them. All right, so let me break down exactly why this Tennessee result has Democrats so excited and Republicans so worried. Because when you dig into the numbers and the context, you start to understand that this wasn't just one weird election. This was a preview of what could be a massive political realignment that destroys Republican dreams of long-term dominance. And honestly, the more you understand about what happened in Tennessee, the more obvious it becomes that we might be looking at the beginning of the end for Trump's political movement. The warning signs are everywhere if you know how to read them. and smart political operatives on both sides are already making plans based on what this election tells us about where American politics is heading. What we're witnessing isn't just a single electoral anomaly. It's the first tremor of what could be a political earthquake that completely reshapes the American electoral landscape and leaves Republicans scrambling to figure out how to win elections without relying on Trump's increasingly diminished political magic. First off, let's talk about why special elections matter so much, because most people don't understand how these races function as political early warning systems. Special elections happen at weird times, they don't get much media attention, and they usually have low turnout dominated by the most politically engaged voters. That makes them perfect laboratories for testing political sentiment without all the noise and distractions of major election cycles. When you see surprising results in special elections, it's often a sign that something fundamental is shifting underneath the surface of American politics. And the Tennessee result was definitely surprising, not because Republicans lost, but because they came way closer to losing than anyone thought possible in what should have been a safe seat. The fact that a race that should have been a Republican cakewalk turned into a competitive contest tells us that the underlying political dynamics have changed in ways that could have massive implications for races across the country, where Republicans can't take victory for granted. Now here's where the Tennessee numbers get really interesting, and this is the part that has Republican strategists staying up at night. Trump carried this district by 22 points in 2024, which means it should have been a cakewalk for any Republican candidate with basic competence and Trump's endorsement. But Van Epps didn't win by anywhere near that margin. The exact numbers are still being finalized, but early reports suggest he won by high single digits or low double digits, a decent victory, but nothing like what you'd expect in such a red district. That kind of underperformance is exactly what you see before political waves start building, and it suggests that Trump's coattails aren't as strong as Republicans thought they were. This massive gap between Trump's performance and his endorsed candidate's performance reveals a fundamental weakness in the Republican coalition that could be exploited by smart Democratic candidates who understand how to run campaigns that appeal to voters beyond just Trump's core base supporters. But let's dig deeper into what this really means for Trump's political brand, because this result exposes some fundamental weaknesses that Republicans have been trying to ignore. Trump's political power has always been based on his ability to energize his base and turn out voters who might not otherwise participate in politics. But special elections are different. They're dominated by regular voters who always show up, not the casual Trump supporters who only vote when he's personally on the ballot. And this result suggests that without Trump himself on the ticket, Republican candidates are struggling to maintain the same level of enthusiasm and turnout that made Trump so successful. That's a huge problem for the GOP heading into 2026, when Trump won't be on the ballot, but Republicans will need his voters to show up anyway. The Tennessee result is essentially a preview of what happens when Republicans have to win elections based on their own merits, rather than riding Trump's personal popularity, and that preview should terrify every GOP strategist who's been counting on Trump to carry their candidates to victory in competitive races. The demographic breakdowns from Tennessee are also really telling, and they point to some longer-term problems for the Republican Party that go way beyond just this one election. Yeah, I know we don't have all the detailed exit polling yet, but early reports suggest that Democrats did particularly well with suburban voters and college-educated whites, exactly the groups that have been drifting away from Republicans since Trump first took office. And here's the thing that should really worry Republicans. Tennessee is supposed to be a state where those suburban defections don't matter, because there are enough rural and working-class voters to make up the difference. But if Democrats are staying competitive, even in deep red Tennessee, by running up the margins in suburban areas, what's going to happen in purple states where those suburban voters make up a much bigger share of the electorate? We could be looking at a complete demographic realignment that leaves Republicans unable to win competitive elections anywhere outside of the most rural and conservative areas. And that kind of geographic isolation would be a death sentence for any party that wants to maintain national relevance. And let's talk about the candidate quality issue, because this is where Trump's influence on the Republican Party becomes really problematic. Matt Van Epps got Trump's endorsement, but that doesn't necessarily mean he was the best possible candidate for this race. Trump has a long history of backing candidates based on personal loyalty rather than electability, and those choices have cost Republicans winnable races all over the country. The Tennessee result suggests that even in safe red districts, candidate quality still matters, and Trump's endorsement alone isn't enough to overcome a weak candidate running a poor campaign. That's a lesson Republicans are going to have to learn the hard way if they keep letting Trump pick their candidates based on who kisses his ass the most, rather than who can actually win elections. The fact that Van Epp struggled in such a favorable district raises serious questions about whether Trump's candidate selection process is actually helping or hurting Republican electoral prospects. And those questions are going to become much more urgent as we head into the 2026 cycle, where Republicans will be defending seats in much more competitive districts. Now, here's where this story connects to the broader political landscape, and this is the part that shows you why Democrats are so excited about their 2026 prospects. The Tennessee result fits into a pattern of Democratic overperformance that we've been seeing in special elections and off-year races ever since Trump won re-election. It's not that Democrats are winning all these races, they're not, but they're consistently doing better than expected in red and purple areas, which is exactly what you see before major political waves. And if that pattern continues for another year and a half, we could be looking at a 2026 midterm that completely reshapes American politics and ends Republican dreams of sustained power under Trump's leadership. The consistency of Democratic overperformance across different types of races and different regions suggests that this isn't just random electoral noise. It's a genuine shift in voter sentiment that could produce massive gains for Democrats if they can maintain this momentum through the actual midterm elections. But here's what really has Republicans worried, and this is the part they're not talking about publicly. The Tennessee result suggests that Trump fatigue is setting in way faster than anyone expected. Trump's second term is less than a year old, but voters are already showing signs of being tired of the chaos, the scandals, and the constant drama that comes with having Trump in the White House. The honeymoon period for second-term presidents is usually pretty short, but Trump seems to be burning through his political capital at record speed. Between the cabinet scandals, the Venezuela situation, and all the other controversies we've been covering, voters are getting reminded very quickly why they were ready to move on from Trump before he somehow managed to win re-election. This accelerated timeline of voter fatigue is devastating for Republicans, because it means they're going to face the midterms with a politically weakened president who may actually hurt their candidates more than he helps them, which is exactly the opposite of what they were expecting when Trump won re-election. The economic factors are also playing a role here, and this is where Trump's second-term agenda might be creating more problems than solutions. Yeah, the economy is doing okay overall, but voters are still dealing with high costs for housing, healthcare, and everyday expenses that make them feel like the system isn't working for regular people. Trump promised to fix those problems, but his second-term policies haven't delivered the kind of immediate relief that voters were hoping for. And when voters start feeling like the president isn't delivering on his promises, they take it out on his party in the midterm elections. That's exactly what happened to Democrats in 2022, and it could happen to Republicans in 2026 if Trump doesn't figure out how to actually improve people's lives instead of just talking about it. The Tennessee result suggests that voters are already starting to lose patience with Trump's failure to deliver on his economic promises, and that impatience could translate into massive losses for Republicans in competitive races where economic issues matter more than culture war talking points. So let's break this down into the key points that everyone needs to understand, because this Tennessee story is way more important than just one special election result. This is about whether Trump's political movement can survive contact with the reality of governing, and whether Republicans can maintain power when they actually have to deliver results instead of just promising to shake up the system. What we're seeing in Tennessee might be the first crack in the foundation of Trump's political coalition, and if that crack spreads, it could bring down the entire Republican political operation in 2026 and beyond. The implications of this single race extend far beyond Tennessee's borders and point to fundamental shifts in American politics that could reshape the entire electoral landscape for years to come. Point number one, and this is the most important thing to understand, the Tennessee result shows that Trump's political magic is already wearing off, and that's a disaster for Republicans who have built their entire strategy around riding his coattails. Matt Van Epps won the race, but he massively underperformed compared to Trump's 2024 numbers in the same district. That kind of drop-off in a safe red seat is exactly what you see before political waves start building against the party in power, and here's why this matters so much. Republicans have become completely dependent on Trump's personal popularity to win elections. They don't have a coherent policy agenda that voters actually like. They don't have popular candidates who can win on their own merits, and they don't have a message that resonates beyond Trump's base. So when Trump's political influence starts to decline, the entire Republican Party is in trouble. And if this trend continues, 2026 could be an absolute bloodbath for the GOP. Come on, when you can barely win in deep red Tennessee, how are you going to hold competitive seats in purple districts where you actually need to worry about Democratic challenges? The Tennessee result exposes just how weak the Republican Party has become without Trump personally on the ballot to energize their voters, and that weakness could be fatal in a midterm election where Trump won't be able to save struggling candidates. Point number 2, and this is where the demographic trends become really scary for Republicans. The Tennessee result suggests that suburban voters are continuing to drift away from the GOP, even in red states where Republicans should be safe. Early reports indicate that Democrats did particularly well in suburban and college-educated areas, which is a continuation of a trend that has been killing Republicans in competitive races all across the country. And here's what makes this especially dangerous for the GOP. Tennessee is supposed to be a state where rural and working-class voters can make up for suburban losses. But if Democrats are staying competitive even in deep red Tennessee by running up margins in suburban areas, what's going to happen in purple states where suburban voters make up a much bigger percentage of the electorate? We could be looking at a complete realignment where Republicans get wiped out in suburban America, and that would end their chances of winning national elections for a generation. The fact that this suburban shift is happening even in safe red states like Tennessee shows that it's not just about Trump being on the ballot. It's about fundamental changes in how educated voters view the Republican Party and its priorities. These demographic changes are creating a political environment where Republicans can only win in rural areas and conservative strongholds, which severely limits their ability to compete for control of Congress or the White House in future elections. Point number 3, and this is where the timing becomes crucial. This result comes at the absolute worst time for Trump's political operation, because it suggests that voter fatigue is setting in way faster than anyone expected. Trump is less than a year into his second term. He should still be in his honeymoon period, and he just won a convincing re-election victory. By all rights, this should be the peak of Republican power and Trump's political influence. But instead, we're seeing early signs that voters are already getting tired of the Trump show and ready for something different. Between the constant scandals, the chaotic foreign policy, and the failure to deliver on key domestic promises, Trump is burning through his political capital at record speed. And if voters are already showing signs of Trump fatigue in December 2025, imagine how they're going to feel by November 2026 when they actually vote in the midterms. Republicans who were counting on Trump's popularity to carry them to easy victories are now facing the possibility that Trump could become a political liability who drags down the entire party. That's exactly what happened to Democrats with Biden in 2022, and it could happen to Republicans with Trump in 2026. The accelerated timeline of Trump's political decline means that Republicans have much less time than they thought to figure out how to win elections without relying on his personal popularity. And point number 4, and this is the most important long-term issue, the Tennessee result gives Democrats a roadmap for how to compete in red states and purple districts by focusing on local issues and candidate quality instead of just running against Trump. Afton Bain didn't win, but she came way closer than anyone expected by running a campaign that focused on kitchen table issues like healthcare, education, and economic opportunity. She didn't make the race all about Trump. She made it about what she could do for Tennessee voters that her opponent couldn't. And that strategy almost worked in a district where it should have been impossible for a Democrat to compete. If Democrats can replicate that approach in competitive districts across the country, they could pick up seats in places where Republicans thought they were safe. The Tennessee result proves that there are cracks in the Republican coalition that can be exploited by smart Democratic candidates who know how to run disciplined campaigns focused on what voters actually care about, rather than just hoping that anti-Trump sentiment will be enough to win elections. This strategic insight could be the key to Democratic success in 2026, as it shows that voters are ready to support candidates who offer real solutions to their problems, rather than just political theater and culture war distractions. Now here's what comes next, and this is where it gets really important for everyone watching. Democrats are going to use the Tennessee result to supercharge their fundraising and recruitment efforts for 2026, while Republicans are going to have to figure out how to win elections when Trump's endorsement isn't enough to guarantee victory. We're already seeing Democratic donors and activists getting excited about their prospects for retaking control of Congress, and that enthusiasm is going to translate into better candidates and more resources for competitive races. Meanwhile, Republicans are going to have to deal with the reality that they can't just coast on Trump's popularity anymore. They actually have to earn votes by offering policies and candidates that voters want. And frankly, most Republicans aren't prepared for that kind of political competition because they've gotten lazy relying on Trump to do all the heavy lifting. The choice for Republicans is clear. Either they figure out how to appeal to voters beyond Trump's base, or they watch their party get destroyed in 2026 when those suburban and educated voters who are already drifting away from them decide to make their break permanent. The Tennessee result is a warning shot that Republicans ignore at their own peril. Trump's magic is fading, voter fatigue is setting in, and Democrats are figuring out how to compete in places where Republicans thought they were safe. If this trend continues, 2026 could be the beginning of the end for Republican political dominance. The countdown to their political reckoning has already begun.